to 21st Century Saints, a podcast and live stream series for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the United Kingdom and around the world. I am your host, Jane Christie. This is my co-host, Alana Wilson-Bryce. Do you want to give us a shout out?
Hey, hello everyone.
Alana, tell me today's date. What are we on?
The 30th of May, 2021.
This is now Sunday, 30th of May. It's 10 p.m. and we are really excited to introduce our guest tonight, who is Jared. Want to say hey?
Hello, it's Jared. Hi.
And we are going to introduce the world to you because, because I think you're possibly the coolest member of the church that I have met up until this point. So there, there's a bit. I'm just saying this is a high bar. I'm not saying you're the coolest, but you're the coolest one that I've met.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I think that's good. So do we want to just maybe kick off with a little bit of a bio? Tell us who you are, where you're from, all of those good things.
Sure. So I am Jared Parmenter. I live currently in Springville, Utah. For those of you in the UK who don't know where that is, it's in the middle of Utah. Most of us in Utah live in either Salt Lake County or Utah County, and Springville is just one of those towns there in the middle of Utah County. And I like Springville. I live close to the mountains, and so I was just telling the ladies before we started, if the muse strikes me, I can take my dogs out the back door, and 2 blocks from my house, there's trails into the mountains, and I can get up into the mountains and get away from the heat and the pressure of the day. So yeah, I live in Utah. I have grown up in the church my entire life. Probably only about 3rd generation on my father's side, and I don't know, on my mother's side, I think somehow I'm directly related to Methuselah through that side of the family. But we grew up in the church here in Utah and in Idaho, where I spent part of my childhood. And I've had kind of wild and weird and interesting childhood, despite living in the midst of Utah, in the midst of the mainstream Mormonism, if you will. But yeah, that's me. I work as a marketing consultant in a firm there, and travel the world and travel different places. And Jane was very kind to say that I'm one of the coolest Mormons she knows. I try to be just fun and rock and roll and cool, because I ain't got time to be stodgy or boring. So that's me.
So you're an outdoors kind of person. For those who are watching later on the podcast version of the show, Jared has green hair. Not only has green hair, Jared has a green mohawk, and it is very, very cool. Yeah. One of my friend's kids had asked his mum if he could have a mohawk, and because she's a cool mum, she's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And when he was looking at himself afterwards in the mirror, he's like, "Oh, that's a mohawk, okay." And so I just think, bravery to the people who are like, so you're outdoorsy, you have a green mohawk. What more is there to say about that? You look the part of someone who is not a member of the church, except for the fact that you're wearing a shirt and tie on a Sunday. That's the giveaway. So tell me,
I sold myself out there, didn't I?
Right, that was the clue. So what's it like? Because it's alien to us. We grew up in Scotland. It's quite in the United Kingdom, where you have to really, really want to be a member of the church in the United Kingdom. There's a load of cultural stuff, but it's not quite. Our whole communities aren't church members. So what's it like growing up in the church?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's experience is probably a little different, but yeah, there's just kind of this expectation everywhere you go and everything you do. Everybody's a member of the church, and everybody sees what you're doing and hears what you're saying, and somehow through the church's secret police, you assume it's always going to get back to mom and dad, and and there's not any truth to that. The funny thing is, when you're a kid, you believe that with all your heart and soul. You're like, oh my gosh, mom and dad have ears everywhere, and they're listening. And
definitely, it definitely gets back to Alana and I will probably
mums have 6 senses. I'm sure of it.
Oh yeah, we know anyway. Yeah, exactly. But but yeah, it's a very small world here. So yeah.
The advantage to it, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And that's the way I try to look at life, is that everything has its pros and everything has its cons. The cons, obviously, is when you're a kid, the minute you do something you're not supposed to, you're instantly just absolutely terrified that it's going to make it back through the grapevine to mom, by at least through like 2 Relief Society presidents and 1 Elders Quorum president and possibly a Young Men's president along the line. And so there's always that fear and that concern when you're a kid growing up to some extent. Though, to be frank, there's not that much truth to it. At least there wasn't in my experience. But the other side of it is if you're trying to be a kid who's trying to follow the commandments and trying to do what's right, I think in Utah, there's a lot less pressure. There's fewer people pressuring you necessarily to stray from that to some extent. And so that's kind of nice too. But then again, on the flip side, the con side is when that pressure does come, it does come oftentimes from other young members of the church who are like, well, that stuff's stupid for our parents. They're the old fogies who think this is important. So it comes with its own mixed bag of interesting experiences. So there's good and there's bad. For example, when I grew up in my ward as a youth, there were, I want to say there was 9 or 10 young men in my ward, and almost all of us went on a mission pretty close to the same time. And it was really good to kind of like amp each other up and get excited about things. But then on the flip side, there was also 9 or 10 young men who would be out doing stuff that we probably shouldn't sometimes, knocking over mailboxes or causing mayhem. And this is the other thing. I oftentimes tell my wife, I'm like, oh man, I was a troublesome teenager, and like I've never touched a drop of alcohol in my life or tobacco or anything like that. My troublesome youth was like going and rolling hay bales at the farm down the road, sort of thing. So, we were really unruly children. So, but no, I mean, it comes with its pros, it comes with its cons, and it was a good experience. I think it taught me a lot about who I was, what the gospel meant to me, what the church meant to me, and that's helped me out a lot throughout my life. So, yeah.
So did you enjoy being in the youth program? Was it fun for you?
Yes and no. I mean, you always have those days where you're like, holy cow, why do I have to go to youth program on Wednesday night? I want to go hang out with my friends or something like that. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, in Utah in particular, a lot of the youth programs, the young men programs, were interlaced growing up with the Boy Scouts program. And that meant camping and hiking and doing archery and shooting. And I loved that stuff. So, that was an easy sell for me to get me into those programs. But yeah, sometimes it was, friends who maybe weren't involved in their youth programs would say, hey, let's go to a movie Wednesday night. And you'd have to kick rocks and say, well, I don't get to because I'm going to do this, that, or the other. But by and large, I mean, again, because it's so culturally ingrained, there wasn't a lot of fight. It was the way life worked. Wednesday night was youth night and Sunday was church. And so it made it very easy. There was a lot less, I don't want to say temptation, more just like cultural conflict that made you feel like you were missing out. We didn't have as much FOMO when I was a kid as kids do these days. I said FOMO. My daughter's watching this and probably cringing full body right now.
Oh, yeah. I hear that. Yeah. Alana, can you relate? Like, I'm thinking about your experience in youth. Was that on a par with how you experienced youth?
I guess, it was kind of hard for me because youth was when you're saying you didn't really have the pull, being in Utah and stuff. Like, obviously in my school, it was basically my family for a long time who were members. So, there was that social pull, for the, come on, let's try a cigarette, or, let's, you're saying the worst thing you did was do some hay bales. I could tell loads of stories of stuff we did, but, so I guess it's, and obviously I did go a bit wayward through my youth. So, as you know, my memories of that are quite vague, but.
Yeah, I think I was the teen convert. So I'm coming in sort of at the end of this, seeing what looks like a really good program. But what I think is, and still is really amazing about the youth program is the fact that leaders are just devoting so much time from their families. I think that's, I mean, we don't get that a lot, right, in the world. That's pretty cool. And it's genuinely coming from a good place. It's coming from, people are building relationships with you. So I really do appreciate that. So then you go on to serve a mission, right? Did you want to serve a mission?
I did. I mean, I had a brief period where I kind of contemplated things and I said, this seems like a lot of my time that I'm giving up. But I think, so number one, I'm very fortunate. My parents, my father came from a very poor farming family in Idaho, and my mom came from a ranching family in Idaho, and they had never, really traveled really outside of even Idaho and Utah much. And they saw fit to make sure that their children had as many opportunities as possible. In fact, I told you ladies when we talked a few weeks ago, I was in a choir as a kid, and my parents wanted me to have those kinds of experiences, to be able to travel and see things. And that choir actually took me overseas to the United Kingdom and Scotland and Wales, and we got to travel around and be a 17-year-old kid running around the tube in London and stuff like that. And we thought we were the bee's knees back then. I'm using old people term. Listen to me.
There's no middle balance. We can't use kids speak and we can't use old speak. It's what it is.
Well, and a lot of your audience is in the UK, so I'm going to start using a bunch of American slang, and they're all going to think I'm nuts. So, but no, yeah, my parents, they really wanted us to have as much exposure and as many opportunities as possible. My dad in particular, farm boy from Idaho, who had never even left the state of Idaho really until he went on his mission, and he ended up going to Tahiti, which was a complete culture shock for him, farm boy in Idaho going to Tahiti. But he saw the value in that, and he saw reason in us having that exposure as much as possible. And so I tell all this because when it came time to think about a mission, I realized that my dad talked about the experiences he had, not just the religious experiences and the spiritual experiences, but really getting to know a completely different set of people and a completely different mindset of how to live life and what life is about. And the wonderful appreciation he had for that. I grew up oftentimes in Utah having some of these families that my dad had taught in Tahiti coming through and visiting our family. And they'd come to our house and we'd do a barbecue, and we'd all end up dancing Tahitian dances in the backyard and stuff like that. And there were times that my dad would take us to, in Utah, just before General Conference, they'll do on the Friday before General Conference, a lot of the mission presidents and stuff will get a stake center somewhere in Salt Lake or something, and they'll bring as many of the missionaries who had served in that mission together as possible, or members who had lived in that area and since moved to Utah to that area. And he'd bring them together and kind of do like a mission reunion type thing. And so all growing up, I had a few opportunities to go to these Tahitian mission reunions and meet all these Tahitian people and missionaries that served there. And one thing that always struck me is how that very different culture impacted a little farm boy from Idaho, my dad. And so, yeah, when that time came, while there was that momentary like teenage, well, I just want to hang out with my girlfriend and make out and go to college and yada, yada, yada. Push came to shove. I realized that the Lord was asking me to serve, and I was excited for that opportunity to serve. And I looked forward to having a unique cultural experience of my own. And so, and very much remembering my time in England and Scotland and Wales and how different it was, even though, we speak the same language, kind of. And even though, we have very similar lifestyles, kind of. It was a different and unique and memorable and meaningful experience to me. So I said, you know what, let's do this thing. And yeah, I went on my mission, and I served in Honduras, Central America, Honduras, if you speak Spanish. It was a very unique and very different cultural experience for me, and a very different religious experience for me, because while the church is the same church there as it is in Utah, culturally, the way people approach it and the way people act around it and the way it affects people's lives is very different. And that struck me. And I think it really began crafting the way I look at, who we are as members of the church, who we are as children of our Father in heaven, and what he's looking for us to do. I mean, it's so unique and so different for every group that's out there. And so, yeah, it's really crafted things. And now my wife and I talked a lot about this, and we share this with our kids. My kids are in a Chinese immersion school, and so they're learning Chinese. And my daughter talks about going on a mission to China, which China's not open right now, or at least it hasn't been. A young man from a ward we just moved out of actually called me this last week and said that he just received his mission call to Hong Kong, which I didn't know that they were sending youth missionaries to Hong Kong. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me. And so that kind of opens up hope for my daughter to go to a very foreign culture, a very different way of life, a very different way of thinking, and share the gospel and remind those people there that they're children of our Father in heaven. And we're all in a lot of different ways of life and a lot of different ways of thinking. And it doesn't change the fact that in the end, our Father's there calling us home. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So in the UK, what we can experience is a lot of, we will often just, what would we say, appropriate the Utah culture. So there will be even the language that we use. So in the UK, we would say missionary, dictionary, things like that. But when we're talking about we would talk about the missionaries. It's just really, it's not how we say those words.
Right.
That is a tiny example of some of the things that we will sort of absorb from church in a totally different country. So talk to me a little bit about what it's like. What are you seeing that's different in the culture from Honduras that you're learning about?
Oh man. Honduras is, and this is a thing, and this is what I try to teach my children, is I had always lived my whole life in the United States of America, thinking that all the other countries out there were exactly the same. You went to college, you got married, you had a house with a yard, and you had to mow the lawn, and you do yard work, and you work a job, and you come home, and then you go to church on top of that, and you do your calling and stuff. And so I think the human mind is only capable of like filling in so many blanks. And so we kind of hold on to the way we perceive our life and our world, and we say it's exactly the same in Honduras. They just speak Spanish doing it, or they have slightly less money. And when I got to Honduras, it's not like that at all. They're totally different. They what they value is totally different. While in the United States of America, we put huge value on college and education and high prestigious jobs and stuff like that. In Honduras, I'd meet people who just, my father was a farmer. I'm a farmer. I love it. I met people who, hey, I fix power lines. I get up at 10 o'clock in the morning and I go do my job for a couple of hours, and I come home and I play soccer in the street, and we grill up some tacos in the street, and we're good to go. And it fascinated me how different the valuing of what mattered to them, and how their history changed the way they view things. And so I share that with my kids, and I say, listen, everybody's got different experiences, like how the church came to them, or how their country moved through strife to freedom, or whatever it is, really it changes the way you view the world. And so as far as the church, it did impact the way they did things at church. In Honduras, they would come together in church, and many of them were driving 1 or 2 hours to church, which in Utah, like I just did our church service meetings not too long ago. I could walk 4 blocks to one of 2 different churches in my neighborhood. It's interesting and fascinating that it became such a family thing. They'd come together for church, and I was used to growing up in Utah, when church was over, dude, church is boring. We're out of here. We're going to go do something else. We're going to go home. We're going to go whatever. But in Honduras, they would hang out. They'd linger for hours and spend time socializing and talking to each other, or maybe, even using the kitchen at the church to put together a meal and everybody come together and eat together because they wanted to be able to stay together. And that didn't make sense until I realized that, some of these people were coming from hours and hours away to be at that event. And they wanted to be able to continue that, as I think some of the brethren have said, the sociality of the saints in that context. And I gain a great appreciation for that. And I'm thankful for those things. And I wish we did more of that in Utah. We don't oftentimes. I just moved, like I said, last summer to a new house, and we moved in the midst of the COVID shutdown. I don't know if you guys know this. You guys mentioned Zoom when we were talking earlier. Utah, a lot of the stakes and wards are back to meeting face-to-face, full meetings and everything. So today was actually our first, the entire ward was back to sacrament meeting. But instead of our standard second hour, our bishopric decided to, since this ward has had so much change and people moving in, moving out in the midst of COVID, that they did a little meet and mingle after church. And so we all stood in the parking lot and ate muffins and drank juice and walked around and chatted with each other. And it was really reminiscent of what we used to do in Honduras. And I was really thankful for that, because I met a ton of people I were in my ward, and I haven't seen their faces once in the 6-8 months that I've been here. So it was great.
I can kind of speak to that. Like when I was on my mission in New Zealand, like they did that quite often in some of the wards. They would meet after church, and I just loved it. And we, before lockdown, I was going to say we as a ward, but me and Jane pretty much started organising, we called it a little munch and mingle. And I think it's really good because, we all go to church on a Sunday, and from 1 week to the next, we probably don't see each other, and the way I look at it is, there's some people out there who are on their own, who don't really see anyone from 1 week to the next. Right. And that's probably the highlight of their week. And I think it is something that we should be doing more regularly. I
agree.
Is coming together. But now, I know not everyone needs activities and not everyone needs that, but it was lovely, like just seeing everyone sitting down, eating and having a little chat. And it was so nice. And as I say, they did it quite often in some of the areas of my mission as well.
Yeah.
I think what you guys are speaking to is really interesting, that I think often as Latter-day Saints, with the big focus on families, often our needs are being met within our families and our homes. And that's really, really great. But I think it's a responsibility. We've made a covenant. There are people who are lonely. There are people who do need to spend that time. That the only uplifting discussion that's going to happen with another human being might be happening that Sunday. And I think it's important to remember that, even when it's not about distance. Yeah. So you loved your mission, right? Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I did. I had a monkey that lived in a tree behind me and would bring me guavas every day. And I walked hundreds of miles in dusty, deserty areas, and I dealt with tropical monsoons, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it for anything. It was fantastic. It was amazing. Crazy, bizarre experiences that you will never have in the United States of America. And in the midst of those experiences, we got to meet people who were really trying to seek understanding of what their role was as a child of our Father in heaven, and really draw closer to him. And that was a cool thing, is in the midst of a completely different world, a completely different universe, a completely bizarre set of scenarios, people wanted the same thing. They wanted to know that their Father loved him, and that he was looking out for them, and that he was helping them. And it was really fun to kind of be the person who's part of that unifying element of all humanity. And that was beautiful, and I loved it.
So there's something that kind of interests me that I'm going to mention just now to put a pin in for a little bit later. So one of the things that it's really difficult not to notice, especially young men, you're being prepared to go and serve missions, you're prepared to do all this work in life, holding the priesthood, and you have this knowledge, and you're going to go out and share this knowledge with the world. This is sacred knowledge. This is like the knowledge everyone needs to have. And so young men, you guys can get a little bit overbearing, and it can get a little bit much, right? So when you come back,
I've never been called overbearing or a little bit much in my life, Jane. Never once.
I don't believe.
If anything, people are like, "Come out of your shell, Jared. Share more. You need to."
Yeah. No, that's definitely not in keeping with your personality. And what I'm really liking is that you have an interesting approach that when we are going to go on and talk about Mormon Twitter for a little bit. It just interests me that we can have, maybe I'm going to say especially men, but men in the church can be a little bit like, here's this amazing knowledge that I have to go and save you all with. And you don't bash people around the head with that. And it just interests me because it's really easy to fall back on constant mission stories and your amazing knowledge.
On my mission, I remember. On my mission.
Yeah. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. I had a stake president who told me, he told all of us, we were in a leadership meeting one time, and he said, "Brethren," he said, "how many of you have been home from your mission for 5 years plus?" And we raised our hand. "How many of you have been home from your mission for 10 years plus?" And we raised our hand. "How many of you have been home from your mission for 20 years plus?" And at that point in time, we don't want to raise our hand because it makes us feel old, but we're like, yeah. And he said, "Brethren, if you're any of those that raised your hand and you use the line 'on my mission,' and that's the last real spiritual experience that you can remember on this, you're doing something wrong." Like, you shouldn't have to hark back to, at this point in time, I served my mission from 1996 to 1998. No, that's wrong. 1998 to 2000. That's right. 1998 to 2000. So that's a long time ago. And he's saying you should be seeking to have those kinds of experiences with people in your neighborhood, people in your workplace, here and now. If the only experiences you can call back on, 20 years later, are your mission experiences. Now, don't get me wrong. I haven't had a monkey living in my backyard since I've been home from Honduras. So I can't compare with that. But that's the thing is when we get home from a mission, the mission, I treated it, and I kind of saw it as it was a training ground. It was a preparatory experience to help me prepare for what was next and what was going to come next in life. And those things that came next helped me prepare for marriage. And then the things that happened in marriage helped prepare me for having children. And things that happened with having children prepared me for, well, heaven forbid, having grandchildren someday. I don't want to be that old. I'm pretty dang young, guys. Come on. Or being a leader in an elders quorum or a bishopric or a stake high council or whatever it is. But that's the point. And so, and to all of you who are listening, when Jane asked me, I kind of forced myself upon this whole situation. Jane asked, "Oh, you guys are all great. I'd love to interview any of you." And I was like, "Great. When you want to interview me?" Thinking I was clever. And Jane's response was, "Well, if you had to give an unfiltered talk about anything, what would it be?" And my response to her on Twitter was, "God isn't magic." That was my response. And that's a bit of a mantra in our household. We talk about it a lot. But it kind of goes to what I'm talking about, is that it's not just magic. There's actually a rationale, a rhyme, a reason behind why our Father in heaven is doing what he's doing with us. And if we're not learning and growing every day and every week and learning new things and growing, it's like the mantra with exercise. You know, if you're not working out and getting stronger, you're getting weaker. And I heard that a lot, and I couldn't really put it in context in my own life. But that's the way it is. Our Father in heaven, I guess the best comparison I can give is this, is I realized at one point that my 3-year-old son, one time driving my car, my son asks, "Dad, how's the car work?" Well, he's a 3-year-old. I've got a couple options here. I can turn to him and go, "Well, there's a magical genie inside the box in front of me. And when I push the button on the right, he makes the car go faster. And when I push the button on the left, he slows it down." Or I can talk to my son and I can say, "Well, there's a large combustion engine that has pistons, and as they interchange back and forth, it spits in gasoline and aerosolized, and then the spark plug has the thing." And as I'm explaining this mechanism, my son looks out the window and goes, "Oh, look, cows." And I look over to see the herd of horses out the window. And there's a happy medium in between. We're like that child in the back seat asking Father, "Where are we going? How does this work?" And he gives us just bits and pieces, what we're ready for at that point in time. But it's important that we embrace that piece at that point in time and learn as much as we can, because the next thing's going to get a little bit more complicated. Maybe my son, I simply say, "Well, when I step on the gas, it puts gas into the engine and that makes the car go forward." And for a 3-year-old, he goes, "Cool. Doesn't mean I'm going to put a 3-year-old behind a wheel of the car. I mean, we all know what's going to happen if we do that. The car's going to careen off and explode and massive problems." But maybe by 5, he wants to know a little bit more about how gas works. And by 7 or 10, he wants to understand an internal combustion engine. By 11, maybe he wants to understand what the gas is and what the gearbox does and the brakes do. And also that by the time he's 15, 16, and you finally put him behind the wheel of the car, he has a basic understanding, but he's still no practical application knowledge whatsoever. So you're sitting there as a parent in the passenger seat, white knuckled digging into the leather because you're freaking out as he's careening side to side and everything's. But that's how they learn. That's how they grow. And that's what it is with our Father in heaven. I think we sometimes think he's some sort of magical genie in the sky, and that if we say enough prayers for what we want, he's going to give it to us. And that's not the way it works. What actually happens is we're given opportunities and experiences so that we can learn where we're at right now and what we need right now, so that we can be prepared for what's next in life and what the next big step is. And each one of those next steps and each one of those new obstacles and those new challenges are an opportunity to become something more. And I think, so going full circle back to your question, I think it's a problem when we dwell on just everything when my mission was perfect and I nailed it and it was a perfect experience and this is the way we did it in Honduras and that's the way. Man, I've had so many experiences since then that dwarf a lot of what happened in Honduras. What happened in Honduras helped me prepare for it and learn how to be compassionate, how to be charitable, how to be a listener, how to be somebody who's open to other people's ideas and expectations, and be able to talk them. It also gave me the opportunity to learn how to communicate with people that thought differently and acted differently and behaved differently. And those were just building blocks to help me do the things that I'm being asked to do today. And I think that's important. We have to recognize not only, we always sing the song, "I am a child of God." We talk about that's the important character that we are, is we are a child of God. But if we are a child of deity, if we are a child of a being who's been in existence for hundreds of thousands of years and will be in existence for millions of years more, he doesn't want us just to come to earth, play around, get somewhat lucky in what we do, and then cool, let's all just chill out in the beaches of heaven. And that's not what he wants. I want my son to learn how to drive a car and learn how to be a good person and learn how to run a business and learn how to do those things. Our Father in heaven wants that for us too. And I think that's for me, my guiding principle in all the things that I do. So
I love that. Alana has, so there are no schools here tomorrow. Schools are all off on holiday tomorrow. So Alana is pulling double duty as a podcast host, and she's fitting in being a parent, which is really cool. So she'll be back with us in a moment. I'm gonna ask her to interject in a second, but yeah, take us back to your bio. So you've
Sure.
had all these amazing experiences. You're home from your mission.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get married right away?
No, that was one thing that I was like, I am not going to get married right away. Like,
oh, really?
And it was a little bit like, this is stubborn. This is stubborn, Jared. This is like all these boneheads who get married right after their mission. They don't even know what they're getting into. You got to date. You got to have fun.
There's my friend.
Yeah. So I dated and I got engaged, I think twice before I actually met my wife, to two different girls, because one of them, we were dating and she showed up at my mom's house with a wedding planning magazine one day, and I came home and my mother and my girlfriend are sitting there. I'm going, okay, so I guess. And she worked at a jewelry store and was showing me rings, and I'm like, and she's like, this is the one you're going to get me. I think that one I kind of accidentally stumbled into an engagement, kind of rather accidentally. It wasn't a bad situation, but
that girl, if you are out there, I really want to talk. Okay.
She was a great gal, and we had a good time together, she and I, and we learned a lot from one another. But I think after that experience, I had a string of kind of rocky relationships, and I remember turning to my friend one time and saying, I think in this world there are just some people who are destined to be alone forever. Now, come on, I'm in my mid-20s saying this, right? Like, oh yeah, I've got everything figured out at 23. Clearly, if I haven't found someone by 23, I'm destined to be alone forever. Wah, wah. But yeah, I met my wife. That's a whole story in and of itself. I'm not allowed to tell that story without my wife. So if you guys want that story, you're going to have to interview her too, because it's a little bit of a train wreck in a very comical way. But she doesn't like me telling a story without her because she feels like I make her the villain of the story.
It's okay. We've got her back. Yeah, we're good. We will totally 100% take her side in this story.
Perfect. But no, I met my wife and we dated for a while, and we did end up getting married. And then same thing, good Mormon boys and girls in Utah, as soon as you get married, you have your first kid like right away. But me and my wife discussed it early on and said, we want to spend some time getting to know each other and setting ourselves up in life. So we didn't have our first child. So I had been home from my mission nearly 4 years before I got married, which to you, you're probably going, 4 years doesn't sound like that much. But in Utah, that's like, holy cow, you're like, we got to set you out of pasture if you hadn't made it. Like if you hadn't gotten it done in another year, you would have been out to pasture, sort of thing.
In church years. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like you're home from your mission for a month, and they're like, "Why haven't you found a wife yet?"
And I'm like, have you met me? Take a look at this thing.
Presenting all of the Lord.
That's right. So, but yeah, then my wife and I got married, and same thing. My father-in-law was eager to have grandchildren and kept asking, when we were going to start. And my wife and I were like, it'll come, our time will come. And it was about another 4 years before we had our first child. So, and in that time, I worked on college. I got a job. And thus began, and I kind of talked to you two about this, but thus began kind of this descent into kind of what my wife and I refer to as our dark years. After we got married, we took on a lot really fast. And I think we didn't realize the impact it was having on us. We bought a business. My wife and I owned a salon together for about 13 years, hence the gorgeous hair. So we owned a business together for 13 years. We had our first daughter. We bought a house all within a couple of years of each other. And it took a toll on us. Like it took up a lot of time being a business owner. It took up a lot of time and new experiences being a parent. It took up a lot of time and expenses and things I had not planned for buying a home. And I had to end up putting college on hold because I took on too much financial responsibility in other areas. And then I felt like a failure in my life, and I wasn't progressing my job, and I was stressing there, and all these stresses and impacts and impacts and impacts are coming in, and I'm just feeling like I failed, you know. Clearly everybody had talked about the golden path that laid before you. You're a returned missionary, and you're a member of the church, and you're faithful, and you're going to college, and you're doing all the things right. And all of a sudden I started feeling like I was a failure. I started feeling like I am the biggest loser that has ever lived. Those experiences piled up for a number of years until it got to a point about the time my daughter was probably 3 or 4, that my wife and I went to church every so often. And if we did, we went to sacrament meeting. And then obviously the child is too fussy, so we can't go to, you know, other responsibilities. So we're just going to go home and take it. You know, we found every excuse under the sun to sneak out, to go home. And part of that, and the underlying thing that was there, was that I hated everybody. I hated everybody. And the reason I hated everybody was because the truth was I felt like I had failed. I felt like I'd done everything wrong. I'd screwed everything up. I was an utter failure. I'm clearly a bad person, but I don't ever want you to tell me I'm a bad person. I don't ever want you to tell me where I screwed up, because that's not your place. And so if you come at me and try and tell me where I screwed up, well, then you're just a jerk. And if you're a jerk, then I don't want to be around you, because if I'm around you and you're going to tell me where I screwed up, then who are you? And so I fell deeper and deeper into this kind of dark place. In hindsight, I think some people might refer to it as depression. I don't know what clinical depression is. I treat it as, and I look at it as, I was the loneliest extrovert that you'd ever meet. I thought everybody loved me, and I'm awesome, and I'm amazing, but you're all a bunch of jerks, and I don't want to be around you, so I'm just going to go do my own thing. And that put me in a very, very dark place, and had me just pulling back from the church, pulling back from my family, pulling back from the things that really mattered in my life. And of course, I didn't want people to think I was, you know, that person. And so I was doing just enough. My wife and I used to joke, we go to church just enough to stay off the inactive list. We'll go like once a month, we'll make it. And then when they ask why we're leaving, oh, the baby's fussy, and oh, we have baptisms with our nieces and nephews, and oh, we have this, and oh, we have that. So busy, so busy. And I think a lot of people fall into that. I think it's very easy to find a way to be busy so that you don't have to face the pressures of every day. And so I was in a very dark place. I felt like failure. And frankly, my wife and I have discussed this, but I was waiting for her to leave me. I was waiting for her to decide that I'd failed. I was a big loser. I was a letdown. I wasn't everything I was built up to be. And she was just going to leave me. You know, after my wife and I've discussed this, it never even crossed her mind. She was suffering as much as I was, but that's the way I felt. That's what I felt about myself. So when people would try and extend callings, or try and ask me to be involved in service projects, or I tried to find every reason under the sun that I could. I dressed accordingly too. I wore big cargo pants and colored shirts and grew out my facial hair, all because I wanted people to look at me and see this scruffy dude who clearly can't do anything. So let's just not even bother asking. It was my camouflage that I hid behind for a very long time. Some things changed in my life, and I was starting to be exposed to some teaching that made me realize that there was something wrong. Something was off. Something wasn't normal, wasn't what it should be. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I still wasn't willing to accept that it was me. I was pointing outwards, and my wife got a scholarship to a mentorship program, which I was excited about. I said, this is going to help us with our business. She's going to be able to teach the girls at our salon, and this is going to be great. But she started trying to, and we laugh about this, she started trying to use what she learned in mentorship on me, because she knew I was suffering. And I was like, get off my back, you're not. And so she wisely stepped back and said, okay, you do you. And just little by little, we started doing these little classes and maybe reading the scriptures together again and stuff. And I started to realize something was broken. And as time went on, I realized that something was broken with me, not that everybody else was broken, as I had been believing for several years, but something was broken with me. And in the end, I identified that basically I had let all of these negative experiences, all of these things that had happened to me that made me feel like a failure, made me feel like I hadn't done what I was supposed to do, pile up on me. And I had allowed that to push me down, and I had allowed that to turn me into this grumpy, sour, everybody else are a bunch of jerks who are being judgmental of me kind of person. And the end result of that was I was the loneliest extrovert that ever lived. And so I had to find a way to get out of it. And so I learned some techniques that worked for me. They're fantastic for me. I don't know if they're for everybody. I teach them to my children. I teach them.
Talk to us about some of those techniques. I would love to hear a little bit about some of those techniques.
So I think the one that really had the biggest impact, and if I get teared up, I'm sorry, because this is kind of like the change in my life kind of period. The big one for me was somebody taught me about, what do you focus on? Do you focus on the negative? Do you focus on the positive? And so this mentor of mine suggested that I write a list of the negative thoughts and the negative feelings that I have and tear it up and throw it away. And so I did that for a little bit, and it was helping. It was making me feel like, why do I have all these negative feelings? Why do I have all these negative thoughts? I took it one step further from piecing together some different ideas that he and some others had, and I ended up buying a journal. I'm a showy person. I like to, do things with some flash and pizzazz. And so I went and I bought this journal that looked like black dragon scale. It was like scaly. And I called it my dragon slaying journal because I was slaying the dragons in my life. And I would sit down and I'd open a page and I would give myself a time limit, because if you don't give yourself a time limit, you go down the rabbit's hole and you may never come out, sort of thing. So I'd give myself like a 10-minute time limit, and I'd just start to write the negative thoughts about my faith, the negative thoughts about my wife, the negative thoughts about my job, the negative thoughts, and we all have them. It's pointless to deny them. Things happen. We get angry. My wife is a jerk because she does this. And I'd write these things out. Boom, 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 boom. And the reality is, as I looked at those, I realized those weren't truth. Those were just my feelings. Those were the negative gunk and everything else that I'd let piled up. They weren't true. My wife wasn't a jerk. She was struggling with her challenges and everything else as much as I was. And maybe she didn't say something to me the way that I would have preferred and made me feel like she was ganging up on me or something. But that wasn't the case. But that's the way I felt. And I wanted that out of me. The next step that I'd do is I would tear that out of that journal, because that's not a part of my life. This is not truth. This is nothing but toxic poison that is polluting my life. So I tear it out of the journal. The step I added is then I would fold it in half, because once it's out, it is no longer a part of me. I'm not going to read this anymore. I'm never going to read this again. And I would get to my knees and I would pray and I'd say, God, this is the ugliest, worst, most nasty and toxic part of my life. And I do not want this in my life. And I know that Jesus Christ paid the price for these things and all the other things in my life. And I need this gone. I'm stuck. I can't move forward. I can't move backward. I'm just stuck. I need this gone. And I would pray until I would feel his comfort and his peace. And I would say, okay. And then I'd go out in my backyard, and this is where my showy side comes in. And I had a little terracotta flower pot in my backyard that I'd lined with foil. And I'd light that sucker on fire and watch it burn to ashes. That's my catharsis. All that negativity, I'm burning it. It's gone. And then I would go back in and I would open that same journal. I'd turn to the page right after the rip. I could see the rip in the the seam of the book. And I would set another timer for 10 minutes, and I would write all the things I was grateful for, and I would write all the blessings that I had, and I would write all the things that were good in my life and the things that meant so much to me. That book still sits in my bedroom, and I can open it to any page, and I can see the rip where the darkness was removed, and I can see the words of the gratitude, the words of the blessings that I have and the change that they had in my life. And that thing is scripture to me. That thing is a blessing in my life, because it is ripping out the root of that big, ugly tree that had me just covered in shadow for so long. But I have to blame my wife, because my wife kind of took me to some of these classes, and this change started to happen. And I started going back to church, and I started being more involved, and I started, because I was excited and I was happy and I felt good again. And I started talking to people and like, life is awesome. Did you know this cool thing that I read in the scripture? And I started getting excited about this stuff because it meant something to me. And then I got called in to be a membership clerk and a ward and a bishopric. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can deal with the records of the people, and I can greet the new people coming into a very transient ward. That's awesome. And I'm excited. And I talk to these people and let's get your records in. And this ward's the coolest ward ever. And then all of a sudden I got called.
You're not wearing your mask at this point.
No, I'm not. At that point I hadn't. That was still like my safety net. That was like I'm still kind of a scruffy runabout dude. Don't worry about it. And so I held back, and that was at that point in time that, okay, so I was in a ward that was very, very transient. extremely transient. We would have people stay no more than a year on a regular basis. And I was the membership clerk, so I had a big job. I mean, I was moving people in, moving people out on a regular basis, but I was really beginning to love it because I got to know all the new members. We actually had, because we were so transient, we would have during the second hour of church, we would have a meeting where all the new members could come into the bishop's office, and I would be there and I'd gather their information, and the bishop would introduce them to the Relief Society president and the primary president and the elders quorum president and get to know them. And I would always tell them funny stories about, oh, this ward's so crazy and cool. And it was a really great meeting for me. And I got to build relationships with a lot of these people. And I suddenly felt like, this is me. I'm alive again. I'm here engaging people, and this is awesome. And then that bishop, his time ran out, and they were going to call a new bishop. And that bishop pulled us together because we were a very transient ward. He had six secretaries and clerks, I think. So he pulled us together and he said, man, listen, this ward is really a lot of work. And so we've actually talked to the stake president. We've asked him if he'll keep all of you as the secretaries and clerks for the new bishopric, because it's going to be hard for them to take all of this in. We all went, no problem. We got this. We can do this. And my wife started talking to me, and she said, you're changing and things are changing and something's coming. And I said, no, I'm a membership clerk. I'm like the cool guy that people like to talk to. I make people excited about coming to church. It's good. She said, no, things are coming. And I have to acknowledge my wife is much more adept at the Spirit than I am. And so I get called by the stake presidency, and they said, we'd like you to come in and we'd like to talk to you. And my wife said, this is something big. And I said, no. Bishop told me I'm going to be the membership clerk because I got to help the new bishop make the transition. It's going to be okay. I went in and I'm sitting there still in my cargo pants and colored shirt and unshaved. And the second counselor in the stake presidency, who later became one of my dearest friends, sits up and he looks at me. He goes, Brother Parmenter, we'd like to extend the call to you to be the second counselor in the bishopric. And my jaw dropped. And I'm sure I turned white as a ghost, and I just stared at him. And you guys have seen who I am and how I act, and I'm a little loud and obnoxious at times, and I couldn't help myself. I looked right at him and go, John, what idiot called me to be a counselor in a bishopric? What moron thought that was a good idea? And I love this guy. He was shocked. He admits, he's like, I was shaken. Like, I've never had anybody say that to me. And he kind of sits up, and I saw it happen. And I saw his face change, and this slow smile melts onto his face, and he goes, Brother Parmenter, the Lord called you. And I was like, oh crap, I just called the Lord an idiot, and I'm thankful that I had good leaders like that, good leaders who understood the person I was and were willing to be patient with me. But then I was told I needed to shave. In hindsight now, I'm glad I shave. I've got a baby face, and now that I'm in my 40s, I like looking pretty young, and I don't mind shaving at all. And the truth is, I never had a very good beard anyway. It was always patchy and scrappy looking, so I actually look half decent these days. So my mask, my camouflage that I was hiding behind was the worst possible camouflage known to man. It was horrible. So, but yeah, that was my first calling into something big, and it terrified me. It still terrifies me to this day. But it was a wonderful experience. And it was, as I went back and I knelt with the Lord and talked about it, I realized it was why so much was changing. It was why my salon had gone so poorly, and I had to learn some of those skills. It was why my wife and I had some of the struggles we had. It was why I had been introduced to some of the people I'd been introduced. As I looked back, I realized in hindsight that the Lord had put me on a path to take me from the dredges of my life, the darkest moments of my life, and slowly but surely move me toward this moment. And I had not even seen it coming. I had no idea it was coming. I was blind to it. But I can tell you right now, it was important that he did it that way, because if 5 years earlier he said, Brother Parmenter, I'm going to need you to be in a bishopric in 5 years, so there's some stuff we got to work on, I would have been like, no, where's the booze? I'm sign me up for that. No way, no how, because I wasn't ready for it.
My beard, guys.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it 5 years earlier. If I had known what he knew, what he saw in me, if I'd known it 5 years earlier, I would have gone hard the other way, because at that point in my life, I was not prepared for it, and I wasn't hearing it, and I wasn't having it, because everybody's a jerk. I hate everybody. I'm a loser. I failed at everything. Why would you ever pick me? And so that's the thing that I teach, is that we don't know what God is doing in our life right now. Sometimes we won't know for years. We won't see it for years, but we have to accept that it is what it is. And we have to accept the path he takes us on, because he sees not who we are today. He sees who we are 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now. This is the eternal Father who has been with us for hundreds of thousands of years. We sat at his knee for thousands of years before the first stone was put into space to be this planet that we live upon. And he will be with us for hundreds of thousands of years beyond, when those of us who reach that point are creating worlds without number, and he's got grandchildren in those worlds. That's the man he is, and he understands us like we can't begin to understand. I look at my little son who's 9 years old, and he sees himself as a Pokemon master and a kid who loves to play Nintendo, and he's just running around and crashing his bike. I see a young man who's going to go to China on a mission and teach the gospel to people who have been pounded down and beat down by oppressive leadership and government for ages and told that they don't matter. But they're going to hear from his lips that they are children of deity. They are children of a God who loves them and has been looking out for them for generations and preparing the way for them to hear his voice once again. I can see that in him. And if I can see that in my little 9-year-old, I can't even imagine what my father sees in me. But again, he told me 5 years ago, I would have jumped ship and run the other way so fast.
And what I'm thinking here is that's really, it's powerful to hear your experience, and that's great for you, but something more is happening. So in the UK, we have such small congregations that people are juggling multiple callings while they're working, while they're providing for their kids, and all of the same sort of pressures to progress in life. So that pressure that you felt is something that I know our audience will really relate to. But in addition to that, the person who's having this experience that you've had, similarly, Alana, you'll confirm this, anxiety and depression is huge because of all of the responsibilities, because of the, the pain as people progress in their faith. There's a lot going on in the hearts of people. And if you've had that experience and now you're serving in the bishopric, tell me, how did that benefit people who were going to come and see you?
Oh,
how
man.
Did your experience bless the lives of others?
So many ways. And I want to be clear, it wasn't me that blessed the lives of others. I just happened to be the poster child. It was God's work that did it, So some of the ways that this changed me. Number one, I have a green mohawk. In the midst of all this, I went through my phases of like rebellion and got to go to rock and roll and concerts, and I don't want to be involved in this stuff, and I'm keeping my distance. We built a salon, we sold a salon, we changed. Our marriage had hit some serious challenges and stuff, and on the kind of a tail end as things started, she and I went to a conference together, and at this conference, this hair conference, they talked about inspiration and what inspires you and what inspires your clients. And my wife and I were just so excited, so beautiful, so amazing, some of the stuff they did. And my wife very sadly looked at me and said, I'll never be able to do that. I do hair in very conservative Utah, and everybody wants the same very standard thing. They want to look like their neighbor. They don't want to look wild and crazy. And I said, honey, as we've been changing, I love you and I want to support you. My head, your billboard, whatever you want to do, let's do. And she asked, what is your inspiration? And I said, mountains. I love to ski. I love to snowboard. I love to hike and backpack. And so that's what this is. This is a mountain with nice little green trees on top. But in the midst of that, like, that's the people we became, the people that we were looking for the positive in life, the people who were looking for a way to move forward, the people who were looking for a way to figure out what the Lord was doing in our life. We didn't understand it. Like, no way we understood it, but he's moving us forward. So what are we going to do? And we embraced some of the wildest and craziest aspects of it, because I'm not a person who can sit around and be bored for too long. I'm kind of a nomad and wild one. And so in the midst, and actually this mohawk was put on my head about 3 to 6 months after I got called into the bishopric. And I remember the stake president walking in when I first had my green mohawk on and looking at me and kind of narrowing his eyes and looking at me for a minute and going, all right. He's kind of moving on. And so I became the bishopric member with the green mohawk. And later, when I was released from the bishopric and called to the stake high council, I was the high counselor of the mohawk. The reason I say this is the core of the experience was this, that you have to identify, like I had to learn to identify how God was working through me. I had to just trust his pattern and his plan because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it at all. An example of this would be my wife and I owned that salon for 12, 13 years. The goal was I was going to retire. I was going to run the salon. We were going to have income coming from it. I was going to be able to be with my family. And 1 year in the fall, after it was right after our 15th wedding anniversary, my wife and I had gone to Disney World with the kids, and we'd gotten calls every day of the week from the girls at the salon needing help with this and needing us to do that. And we said, what are we doing wrong? What are we screwing up? And so we started praying about it, and the answer came to me, and I was like, I am not talking to my wife about this, God. Are you kidding me? The answer was, sell the salon. You're done. And I'm like, I am not going to my wife, who I just spent 13 years building this business with, and telling her. And little did I know, when she was praying to God, God told her, sell the salon. It's done. But she wasn't going to come talk to me because he just spent 13 years of his life working outside of his full-time job to build this up. And when we finally stopped and we talked to each other, and I said, I've been feeling like maybe we should sell it. She said, me too. Holy cow. And it was a matter of a couple of months, and it was gone. Last year, same thing with our house. We'd been in the same house for 16 years. You know, we were, they always joked that we were the foundational members of this very transient ward. And then one day I had to show up to stake president and say, so God's got a different plan for me. Sorry about that. And move our house. But we never understood the reasons why. But then we got into this house. We're very settled. We're very happy here. And COVID hits. And salons are struggling and shutting down. And now in Utah, right now, most houses, if you want to buy a new house in Utah or move into a new house in Utah, you could be looking at 18 months before you move in. And the prices have skyrocketed. This house that I bought has probably gone up 50% in value since then. My wife and I would never be able to afford a house like that. But it all goes back to my wife and I, when we had this change and began listening to him and began paying attention, we realized that he's not going to sit you down all the time and say, okay, here's how it's going to go. You're going to sell the business, then you're going to sell your house, and then you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to get over here. Because we don't have the patience as his children. We don't have the understanding as his children to see that full plan. What we need to do is, when he gives us those little nudges, we go, okay, it doesn't make sense to me, but you're the boss. I know what's going on. Let's do this thing. And if we embrace that and move forward, then he'll change us. So I took that kind of mentality into being a member of the bishopric, and I would sit down with brothers and sisters, and I would have brothers that would come in, and I would be extending them a call. Okay, so let me take a step back. This is a question that came up on Twitter. Somebody asked, why do bishoprics not tell you why they're calling you in for an interview? Somebody was very upset about that, and I understand the upset. It's stressful at times. But here's the truth. I sat in that room with a bishop and another counselor, and we would see this ward that was struggling and in pain. And we would say, how do we help this ward? I don't know how to help this ward. And we would always come to the same conclusion. Why are we trying to solve this? We don't know these people well enough, but God does. And we'd get on our knees and we'd pray, God, we need this calling filled. We need that calling filled. This program is suffering because there's not, reliable people in it. How do we fix this problem? We don't get it. And sometimes God would literally just say, get Sister Johnson into your chair. Bring her in, interview her. Are we giving her a calling? Does she need repentance? Like, what are we doing? Get Sister Johnson into the bishop's office and sit down with her and talk with her. And we would bring Sister Johnson in, and we'd sit down and we'd talk to her. And all of a sudden, as I'm talking to her, and she's telling me her pain, and she's telling me her challenges, and she's sharing with me her experiences, I can stop and say, Sister Johnson, I can tell you with full confidence, God is aware of these things, and you don't have to carry them. I've learned from hard personal experience, you can get rid of these pains. We talk about that and talk about those pains. And as I see through her tears, her smile, the bishop would come in and I'd say, I think we found the young women's president. And he'd say, yeah, I think we would. And then it was like Rochambeau, who actually has to tell her, But that was the thing, is that's how God worked through us, is through those painful experiences. And the time that I spent fighting against everything he was trying to do in my life, worrying about me trying to fix me, worrying about I'm a failure and everything else, I realized that if I just put that stuff to the side, and if I actually pay attention to who he sees me as, then there's a lot of potential there. And if I can help other people see and feel that, and we had a brother come in one time and he sat down and I said, brother, the Lord has called you to be the second counselor in the Elders Quorum presidency. And he welled up with tears and said, I can't do that right now. And he brought up that he had some repentance to do. And I smiled and I said, God put you here so he could start that process with you. Why do you think you're here? And I said, let's get you with the bishop. Let's sit down. Let's figure out what you got to do. And I guarantee you, this is you in a few months. And we went, the bishop met with him. I discussed with bishop, and bishop said, we're going to hold the position. It's his. God wants him to do it. And bishop met with that young man for about a month and a half. And then I remember bishop came to me and he said, you get to give the call again. And I got to bring him back into the office and sit him down across from me and say, so God held it for you. We'd like to call you to this. And I got to see his face, knowing that he did what God asked him to do to be prepared for that position. That's the kind of experience God wants us to have. God wants us to hear his voice and see his plan and trust him. And he can transform us in ways that we're not going to be able to do, that we're not capable of doing by ourselves. If we sit and hold on to our way of trying to do things, if we sit and hold on to, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm a stressed out, angst-ridden person, he's never going to be able to change us. But I guarantee you, it takes 10 minutes of putting that weight down and getting on our knees and saying, I'm burnt. I need you. What would you have me do? And the path will very quickly become clear. Doesn't necessarily tell us where he's taken us, but the path will become clear. And when we get to the top of the hill and can look back at the path he took us on, it's far more glorious and beautiful and amazing than we ever could have imagined what we were trying to do on our own. And that's the thing that I brought to people. And I would see divorced women, and I would see children from families that were less active, and I would see men who were dealing with sin that they were trying to overcome come in and see that pain just fall off them, like somebody just clipped the line and it just began to fall off them. And I could see them begin to move forward once again and trust in him and turn to him. And that was the thing that I would always talk about. And one thing that I'd like to touch on briefly, and I heard you guys talk to John DeLynn and others about these disciplinary councils. And I did, when I was in a bishopric and also when I was on the Stake High Council, have opportunity to participate in a couple of these. And I do think everyone is different and everyone is unique. They are hard. They are hard. But I can tell you, they can also be some of the most enriching and enlightening experiences that anybody can have. We had one brother who came to us and he had commit some significant sin. And he asked us, what he needed to do. And we prayed with him fervently for several days. In the end, the decision was made that he had to take some steps back and had to start over in a lot of ways. But he trusted that God had a path for him. And I don't want to get into too much detail, but when you look at that situation and you look at what God's trying to do in your life, don't worry about what humans think, because we're all imperfect. I'm a bonehead. I'm an idiot. Okay. I'd say and do stupid stuff. I have to go probably apologize to my children today for snapping at them about not taking the dogs out to the bathroom before I jumped on a podcast or something like that. We have to forgive the human element. The human element is imperfect, but God has a plan and God has a purpose. And in those disciplinary councils, the one in the Stake Council that I was in particular, the hard part about that was I knew the guy really well. I knew him super well. And he and I have become even closer friends afterward. And we've talked quite a bit about it. And he's still working in that direction. But even he said it. He said, I couldn't move forward where I was. I couldn't move forward where I got myself moved so forward and I'd got myself stuck. And he said, I had to step back and I had to climb out and I had to start over. For so many people, that's what it's about. It's about stepping back getting control of a situation, getting to where God would have us start as a new foundation point, and then trusting those other brethren and sisters around us to bring the Spirit into our lives, to bring guidance, to bring support, to bring love, and to be willing to trust in the hand of the Lord to move us forward in whatever direction we need to go. It's not often or always the direction that we think we're supposed to go or that we've decided we want to go. But I guarantee you, if you move in the direction he's taking you, if you follow the path he's taking you, when you get over the top of the next hill where you can't see what's on the other side and you look back, it'll make sense and it will be beautiful where you're standing. And that is what I believe in wholeheartedly.
You know, if he were here right now in this call, I would be giving a shout out to Alana's dad had served, and served not only as a bishop but served in bishoprics over the years, and I got to have an experience with him where I can totally I can feel what you're saying. I can feel the love and the intent behind that, and I think I guess I just wanted to thank you for being the person who's trying to do something that is painful, there's a lot of consequences. I guess I'm thinking that here is you who, if I was in your ward, I would simply look and think, I could probably talk to this guy. Jared seems like someone you look like I could talk to you. And when I hear you, if I were to be able to share the concerns that are in my heart, you would have been able to relate. You seem to get it. And so I want to, when you had talked about your son, having questions, I think we've shared this before, but Alana, would you jump in and share the story of your daughter and the Easter Bunny? Would you do that for a second?
Yeah,
I remember listening to this story.
So my little girl, who was 7 at the time, obviously she's questioned Santa Claus and things before because of things that children at school have said, and I've got away with just saying, oh, they're talking a load of nonsense, don't listen to them, and of course he's real. And so one day she's asking about the Easter Bunny. Is Easter Bunny? I'm like, yeah, of course, and then you're kind of thinking, and she just pulls out her phone and she's like, well, I'm going to ask Google. I'm going to Google it and ask if the Easter Bunny's real. And so obviously in answer to that, it also came up, again, this is not for children, that it said Santa Claus wasn't real and the Tooth Fairy wasn't real.
Which offends me. We believe in our household. We believe in Santa and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy.
Well,
absolutely.
We do in our household too.
How easily accessible it is now to just look things up on the internet.
Well, this is why I think it's really important, because awesome. So we've got people, children, but adults too, who are asking questions of their parents, who are asking questions of each other, their peer group, but also they're just going and Googling it. And so that's going to lead us to talk about Twitter. Do you want to give us an overview of a couple of terms that we might mention? So Mormon Twitter, first question, is it a place that you would recommend someone hangs out? Is Mormon Twitter fun?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Would you be like, yay, go to Mormon Twitter?
Here's what I'll share. Okay, so first of all, back to the whole searching the Tooth Fairy and stuff like that. Yes. I think this is the problem. Is that my children, I need to be everything I can so that my children will trust me and will come to me and can have those conversations with me and not take the words of advice of some crazy person off the street or Google. I mean, here's the thing. In the United States of America, we've had some severe political disparity in the United States in the last 18 months. And you can Google any of those topics, and they've proven definitively that Google is going to serve up results based on your past and your history that it thinks you want to see. We're living in this universe that, like, we surround ourselves with echo chambers. We surround ourselves with people that are just going to reinforce the ideas that we've already searched for. So if you've already kind of decided, oh, Santa Claus isn't real, and I'm going to search this on Google, that's what you're going to find. That's what you're going to find about Christianity. That's what you're going to find about, politics, whatever it may be. And Twitter is a huge piece of this. So what I recommend somebody dive into Twitter. This is the warning that I give everybody. It's just like a swimming pool. Okay. I love diving into a swimming pool. I will go to the 15-foot deep end of the pool. I'll climb the high dive. I will try and do a backflip, try and do a backflip and probably end up doing a belly flop instead because I'm just that bad. But I love it and it's fun. And I dive in and I can swim out and I can swim to the shallow end and walk out and have that nice red color from my belly flop and be proud of the fact that I did that. And I'm fine and I'm good and I'll laugh it off. But if you don't know how to swim, if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, you can paint yourself. And in the society that we live in, the reaction is somebody who I can turn to, Alana and say, Alana, the diving board is awesome. Go do a backflip and it'll be awesome. And Alana's going to belly flop like I did. And she's going to come out of the water and she's going to say, why in the world would the swimming pool allow me to do that? That's unsafe. That's unconscionable. It's terrible. This pool needs to be shut down. The water was too hard. It was too cold. That is not safe for everybody to do. So the thing is all of these different areas we go into, you have to kind of know what you're going into, and you kind of have to know. But the problem is we can't also police everything at the same time. So would I tell somebody to go to Twitter? I would tell people to go to Twitter, but I would say take what happens in Twitter with a grain of salt, because what you get in Twitter is not truth. You don't get truth. Truth is not found on Twitter. Truth is not found on Google. Truth is not found on Facebook. What you find in those places are people's experiences with human beings, with mistakes, with truth. You have people's thoughts and feelings. You have people's reactions to things. And we can get that in our normal life. Like I can go out into the living room and I can, shout at my children because, they're not doing something I want them to do. And their reaction, their sentiment at that moment in time is my dad is a jerk. And so if a police officer is passing down the street, the police officer is like, do you have a good father? No, he's a jerk. He screams at us and my kids are gone, So that's the thing is we have to remember that we're humans. We're children. We are literally, when we say I am a child of God, I'm 42 years old. I am still a child. In fact, I introduce my wife oftentimes as a single parent of 3 unruly children, but that's a different story altogether. But we're children, and we are subject to emotional outbursts. We are subject to being butthurt about the stupidest things. We are subject to pitching fits. We are subject to all of these things. And the result of that is when you go to Twitter, you're not getting truth. You're getting somebody's emotional reaction to an experience that they had that may or may not have something to do with truth. And so if you approach Twitter, you have to approach it with that knowledge. These are people. But the other side of it is, if you can do that with wisdom, as Christ did in Galilee, as he went and he sat with the prostitutes and he sat with the publicans, you're also sitting with people who they are reacting the way they are because they are in pain. A very wise mentor of mine once said, hurt people, meaning the adjective, hurt people, people who've been hurt people, the verb, hurt people, hurt people. An animal that is trapped in a trap, if you try to help it out of that trap, it is going to bite and claw and lash out at you, despite the fact that you are doing nothing more than trying to release it from that trap. And that is important to remember, that when we go to Twitter, when you go to Facebook, when you go to all these places, even if I sit down with a woman or a man in a worthiness interview for their temple recommend, they are suffering pain. Pain from the stresses of life, pain from experiences that they've had, pain from nasty, evil, just obnoxious things that people have said to them. And they may lash out at me and say mean things to me. Does that mean I'm a bad person? Does that mean that they hate me? No. It means there's a hurt animal sitting there and they're lashing out. And that's what Twitter is oftentimes. And that's what Facebook is oftentimes, is people who've had personal experiences and they're lashing out. And I talked to you guys about this. I've noticed this and I've seen this. And I was the hurt animal that was lashing out. You guys are all a bunch of jackasses. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Rah, 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 and all the things I used to say and think. Now, having come away from that and realizing, oh my gosh, I was so cold and so cruel to some of the people who just wanted to love me, who just wanted to take care of me. When I was in my really dark period, the bishopric, the guy who was our bishop at the time became a very dear friend of mine after I came out of this dark period. But during the time that I was in that dark period, he would call every so often, hey, we'd love to come to your house. I don't have a bishop in my house. What is the bishop going to do? He's going to come to my house. He's going to be a jerk to me. He's going to tell me that I'm not coming to church. Why aren't I coming to church? Because I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner. That's what he thinks. He thinks I'm a bad person. And that was my sentiment. And once I stopped being a herd animal and I got to know the man, he's one of my favorite people in the world. I go to dinner with him and his wife, and we laugh and laugh and laugh for hours. But that's the thing, hurt people hurt people. So do I recommend you go to Twitter? Yes, absolutely. But go to Twitter knowing that you're walking through a forest of animals who've caught their legs and their tails and their paws in traps, and they are lashing out with anger and hatred and vitriol. And I've taken it upon myself to be the kind of loving, kind father figure who just kind of goes, it's okay. I know it sucks. It hurts. Well, I've been there.
We're gonna talk about your approach on Twitter in a second. But I mean, I guess I would say that if it's sort of warm fuzzies and comfort that you're looking for, and it's social media, maybe Instagram, maybe it's a little bit.
If you want warm fuzzies, you go adopt a dog or a cat at the local shelter. You don't want to be on social media for warm fuzzies. It is cold, pricklies, and nasty barbs.
Yeah. So I would say the hierarchy of what's going to be comfortable. Maybe Instagram, maybe a little bit gentler.
Yes.
Twitter is way more unfiltered and it can be quite hardcore. I mean, we've got things like Reddit, which is just. I mean, we're going to talk about Reddit in a few weeks. We're going to talk about Mormon TikTok. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what we're going to do with that one. But Twitter is where, so we'll hear some terms on Twitter. So we group all of the information together so it's easily findable. We'll use hashtags to kind of organize what we're saying.
Categories, like thoughts, Yeah.
So do you want to tell us how you would explain some of the common terms? So we want to know what is DesNat and what is Progmo?
Okay, cool. So DesNat is a group of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The term comes from the idea of Deseret nationalists or Deseret nationalism. There was a time, and especially for you guys in the UK, this might be kind of a bizarre concept. You know, we're Americans, we're gun-toting, 6-gun shooting cowboys of the West kind of people, and that spirit abides in us to a large extent. And Deseret nationalists largely, and I don't know the details because I'm not like deeply affiliated with DesNat, but I have a lot of friends that participate in stuff. But they definitely look at it as, the nation of God is meant to be a nation of righteousness, a nation of Zion, a nation where there is equality amongst all, and that there is a righteous judge, God judging all things, sort of thing. And they're not necessarily saying that they are that, but they are fighting for that, and they believe in that, and they don't believe that tearing down the establishment of the church is the way to get there. They believe in being. They like to talk about being orthodox in the following of the prophet and things like that. And I think that's important. And I think there's a lot that can be said there. But as with anything else, you can get very impassioned and you can get very upset at times. And people, and I've seen people of DesNat themselves go on tirades and say some things, and then later kind of back up and go, okay, maybe I overdid it a little bit. Maybe I can be kinder. They're imperfect just like you and I are. And they're just trying to voice their belief. And there are some who are just nasty and mean and hateful. There are some who are just young. And here's the thing. This is what I tell my wife all the time. I remember when I was 20 years old, when I was in college and I was like 20, 23, I had it figured out. My parents were idiots. My leaders were idiots. I knew what they needed to do. Why weren't they listening to me? It's easy. You guys are all just stupid. You should just listen to what I'm saying and everything will get fixed because I know what I'm talking about. When you're 20 and you're becoming an adult and you're moving out of mom and dad's house and you see the problems of the world, you think you figured out all the answers and you think you have all the answers. And it happens to every 20-year-old. I tell my nieces, my nephews, my children, but don't get so embroiled in those perfect answers because the world is infinitely more complicated and more crazy, and at the same time more beautiful and more wonderful than that. And so don't get so black and white, don't get so nailed down in all of that, and don't get so hateful about it, because the reality is there's so much you haven't experienced and haven't learned yet. And I think the problem with DesNat, as well as with the Progmo community, is that you get some of these young people who get some ideas in their head that they think that they know the way the world works and they're going to solve the world's problems. Everybody just needs to shut up and listen to what they're saying. And they kind of jump down people's throats. I'm guilty of it too. I'll just say it right now. I'm guilty of it too. And I think the problem becomes, it doesn't matter if you're DesNat, if you're a progressive Mormon, that's what Progmo stands for, by the way, is progressive Mormon. Whether you're just a member of the church, whether you're of some other group, whether you're not a member of the church, it doesn't matter who you are. When you become so self-convinced that you have all the answers and you are perfectly right and everybody just needs to shut up and do what you're saying and everything will be okay, that's when you're in the wrong. It's not that simple. It's simply not that simple. The only person who has the right to say that and do that is their Father. And I guarantee you, I don't know an ounce compared to what that wonderful, beautiful man knows. And I think that's the problem. And so, DesNat, they fight for what they call orthodoxy. Progressives are fighting for, we need to see change and forward momentum in the church, and we want to see policies change and so forth. Where I live in that universe is I don't really engender either of them strongly. I think both of them have, on occasion, valid things to say. I think both of them on occasion have very angry, vitriolic, hateful things to say, because they're my brothers and sisters. They're people who, many of them are having experiences or have had experiences that I haven't. There are people out there who are dealing with the LGBTQ plus part of society. I don't have any direct interaction with that in my life because I don't have any family members or close friends. My best friend growing up, he's a gay man who's now married to his husband. But outside of that, I don't know what they're suffering. I don't know what their pain is. But I do see that I have brothers and sisters who are in pain, and I can love them and I can be charitable toward them. Do I know what's going on and how God's going to sort all that out in the end? No, I don't know, but I love them. That's all I can do, is I can love them. And DesNat's the same. They're very, convinced that this is the way it has to be. I don't know that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. There's some good ideas there. There's some bad ideas there, but I love you all the same, because they're good people. That's the thing, is every one of them are good people. They're human beings who have had experiences and had challenges and had people say things to them. And they might be in the same place I was. They might be in this place where they have beat themselves up or others have beat them down, and there's self-loathing and there's hating of others. And it's a dark place to be, and it's a lonely place to be. And there's no reason for me to have any negative feelings towards them. And so my take and my approach has always been, I just love all of you. And if you want to know how I got out of it, I'm happy to tell you how I got out of my pain and my suffering. And it's awesome. It's rad. It's fantastic. It may not work for everybody. I said that at the beginning. It worked for me. It works for my kids. It works for some of my friends. It's maybe not the best way for everybody, but there's always a way.
Yeah. And I think it's really, I think it just speaks to your personality that you hear people, you see, you're very person-centered. I mean, I know that on Twitter, I don't think we could even put a fine point at the moment. I don't think we could emphasize enough just how polarized this is. I mean, people, we just shared one of the comments that we've received here, that some people are viewing DesNat as a hate group, and that I completely understand. Some people are viewing Progmos as, you're doing Satan's work. And where I sort of fit in, I guess, where I hang out on Mormon Twitter is just maybe talking a little bit about conference or seeing people's stories and just sort of amplifying their pain, or speaking to people's experiences, I guess. I
think that's the best thing you can do, because I saw the comment about DesNat being a hate group, and I will say DesNat has said and done hateful things individually as a group. Progressives have done the same thing. It's like children. Children get on the playground. My dad's bigger than your dad. My dad could beat up your dad. You're a jerk. You're a poo face. You're, all the things that we say to each other. And the reality is, underneath all those things, they're children. They're sweet, innocent, beautiful children who just want to have fun and want to play, and sometimes get a little stuck in their head that the way they want to play is the only way to play. And I think we have to stop getting so embroiled in labels and embroiled in who's right and who's wrong, and really just look at the individual. When a person sits down in front of me, or I interact with a person directly, I just look at who that person is. And I love that person. And it's easy for me to love now. I used to hate everybody. I hated everybody. If I met you on the street, I didn't know you. I didn't know what your situation was. Doesn't matter. You're a jerk and I hate you. But now I'm in a very different place, because every single person is a beautiful thread, a beautiful panel in a gigantic tapestry that is the eternal kingdom of our Father in heaven. And if you can stop looking at the flaws and the misstitches here and there, and step back and look at this beautiful tapestry that is our God's kingdom, our Father's world, it's a beautiful place. And you know what? There's going to be imperfections. Your imperfections are no worse than mine, or vice versa. And I love you because you're my sister. And you're struggling and I'm struggling, and you know what? Let's just figure this thing out together, and let's get to the best place we can. And I think that's all we can do. And as a member of a bishopric, I had many, many opportunities to do that. I had men and women that would come sit down. I had youth that would come and sit down and talk about preparing to go to the temple, or would talk about just their challenges in life and what they were feeling. And it became really easy, and it's one of the most fulfilling things in this world to just love them. They may have some serious disdain for certain people. They may have some serious pain and suffering from the way people have treated them. They're just people. They're just children, and they're trying to make the best of life that they possibly can. And I love them. And if I can help them, if my experience, if my learnings can help them, I'm going to do it, because they're just friggin' rad.
Alana, did you have something you wanted to
jump
in?
I was just thinking, I love how you noticed that. Like, I'm not the type to just jump in on top of you when you're speaking.
And I just talk nonstop, so jump in anytime.
Yeah, just stop talking. Yeah. This is about you. This is about you tonight. No, I just think, like, I've spoke about this before, and I think a lot of what you said is people need to listen, you know, because within the church, and I mean, I've been guilty of it in the past too. I'm not saying I'm perfect, you know. I've got repentance in that area to do too, you know. But we worry too much about the wrongs that everyone else are doing. We judge people. They look at them. They're not reading the scripture. They look at them. They're out smoking but still coming to church, you know. And I think it all goes back to, and I keep saying this, you know, aren't we taught within the church? And when we look at Jesus, didn't he just love people? He loved the sinner. You know, I always find problematic when people say love the sinner but not the sin. I hate that. Like, you know, we should just love people regardless of whether they do wrong, regardless of how they act to things. You know, like, everyone's on a journey, like you say. And I guess, you know, I go back to, you know, I've said in the past about like you're saying, you know, you just love people and you understand the journeys they're on, and that people make mistakes, and people, when you say about how they feel, you know, we may not necessarily agree 100% with what they're feeling, but it's valid for them, and we should allow them to feel validated in what they're saying.
Right. And I agree. I think that's important for people to be able to express themselves and share those feelings, and for us to relate to them. We're all children. We're all traveling on different roads, hopefully in the same direction. And that's what it is. I do think, and this is where sometimes this struggle comes in, is that we have to love them, and we just get to love them and work with them and express our feelings with them. But sometimes we have to agree to disagree and part at that point in time, because we don't always see things the same way. And that's okay, because, you know, I am not the perfect being standing on a pedestal dictating how the gospel is distributed and handed out in the world. I'm not. And I probably never will be in this life, because I got a green mohawk and I listen to rock and roll music too loud. And my neighbors think I'm a teenager. But, you know, the point is like, I need to stand for something, and I stand for the love of Jesus Christ and the gospel that he's taught. And I try to share when we go to Sunday school, when we go to elders quorum, when I give a talk in church on Sunday, or I bear my testimony on fasting testimony day. I just want to share that my experiences have brought me closer to my Savior Jesus Christ, and how that's brought me closer to my Savior Jesus Christ. And my hope is that there's somebody out there that maybe is suffering some pain, or maybe is suffering some challenge or something, that they'll hear that and they'll go, you know what, that helps me today, make it one step further along the way. Or if I'm in a position of leadership and I'm sitting across from somebody, I can maybe give them some recommendations of some things that help me and serve me, and they can take that and apply that. But I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to condemn individuals. I have no right to do that. I have no power to do that. I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to condemn them. I'm just going to tell them there is a path. We are not there yet. So don't think that we're there yet. Just get down on your knees and ask him, what do I need to do tomorrow? And just take it one step at a time.
So I'm going to get you then to make this personal for me. This is the reason why I thought you're going to be such a great person to chat with.
Oh, well, thank you. Now I'm scared.
Yeah.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Put your experience hat on. You know, this is not going to be new for you at all. But I have really personally struggled, I think, when I see members of, I mean, we're tiny, our words are tiny here, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we love each other, you know, we know all, we're up in each other's business, and it's great. We're each other's cheer teams. And then when we talk about what's playing out on Twitter, is really it's an example of what we're seeing playing out in the church with this sort of polarized view. And I have really struggled when I see members of our church being racist, or being just simply unkind, or Kathy Jo's comment, like seeing an organization as a hate group. What do you do with that? I guess what I'm asking is, I know I'm commanded to love people, but I struggle when it's, I feel like maybe I want you to be held to account for being a terrible human being sometimes, more than I want to, think about how I'm going to love you after you've been held to account. Does that make sense?
So here's the analogy. Here's the analogy I gave one time is, let's imagine for a moment that you are somebody who is doing drugs, drinking alcohol, far from, the main line of the gospel, right? And there are two people in this world. There is a person who is a faithful member of the church, doing everything they should, who every time they see you, they say, Jane, you know it's wrong to drink. You need to stop that and get yourself on the straight and narrow, or you're going to hell. And every time you do drugs, you're destroying yourself. You need to stop that. And then you've got another guy on the other hand, and I like to hope I'm the other guy, who says, oh man, that challenge, like, that's gotta suck. I can't imagine what that's like, and that's painful. Have you, and what's your experience like? Well, I've tried to quit. It's hard. I've never drank. I don't understand what that's like. I don't know what it's like to try and quit that. That's a challenge, really, it is. And we converse and we talk, or we become friends. Maybe you're not ready to change today. Maybe you're not ready to change next week. Maybe you're not ready to change next year. But when the day comes that God, now remember, I talked about my 5-10 year timeline, that God was working on me and working me in a slow and steady course towards what I needed to be. When that day comes for you and you realize, I want to change, I want to be something different, are you going to go back to that brother or that sister that constantly got in your face and said, well, you're going to hell if you don't stop, you're going to, no. You're not going to go to that person. Are you going to go talk to the guy who was a good friend and loved you despite it, and continued to be your ally? Hi. And support you and love you and talk to you and try to be the good person in your life. But you looked at them and you said, they didn't drink, they didn't smoke, they were going to church, they were having a good time, they seemed like everywhere they went, it was just a party and it was exciting. And which one of those two people, when you're ready to change, when the Lord finally puts you to the point that you want to be something different, which one of those two are you going to seek out to help you? Which one of those two are you going to rely upon? And I think the reason we've been given the command to love one another, the reason we've been given the command to be the Good Samaritan, is because no one is going to come to you for help if all you've done is spewed hate and vitriol at them. No one is going to come to you and ask for your opinion if all you ever did was use your opinion as a weapon against them. It doesn't matter if they're a racist. It doesn't matter if they're, somebody who is focusing on hate speech. It doesn't matter if they're a misogynist or a misandrist. It doesn't matter what they are. if all you do is weaponize your belief that you are right and they are wrong and use that as an attack stick to beat them down with, when the moment comes that God, who's the wisest among us, has slowly but surely made the progressive changes in that person's life, to the moment that they say, I want to change, they're not going to come to the guy with the big stick. They're going to come to the funny looking dude with the green mohawk who's just been loving on them and having a good time and being their best friend despite everything. And that is why I chose to be who I am, is because I've had too many friends. I've had too many family members. I've had too many people I've known who, when push came to shove, they didn't have anybody to go to because everybody was carrying a big stick. When I reached the point that I wanted to change in my life, there were a lot of people who'd had a big stick and beat me down. I wasn't going to them, but there was this bishop, this guy who constantly called me, hey, how you doing, Brother Parmenter? Just wanted to come and see if I can visit you. Right now, you're a jerk. I don't want you to come to my house. Oh, how's your dog? How's your wife? How's your kids? Never, ever asked me about sin. Never once asked me about what was going on. He just wanted to love me. And when I was ready to change, he was there to give me a big old hug. And I was so excited to be hugged by that guy. And when he said, now I want you to be my membership clerk, I was like, yes, I'm terrified, but yes, I'll do it. That's what we need to be, and that's what we need to do. And while I understand the sentiments that there are people who are, yes, does racism exist? Absolutely. Is there undeniable hate even within our own church? Yes, absolutely, undeniably. Is there misogyny? Is there misandry? Is there bigotry? Is there, yes, it's everywhere. It's in every church. It's in every corner. And it's because our brother, who didn't want us to follow God's plan, is using all the things that seem right and good and true to make them nasty, vicious weapons so that we as a bunch of children, literally, that's what it is. Lucifer is our brother, and he sees us playing on the playground, and if he can convince us, he'll hand us a sharp stick and say, you know, you can win this fight if I give you the stick and you go poke your brother with this stick. And we take the stick and we run around the yard and we're poking the crap out of each other and thinking we're winning. We didn't win anything. We didn't do anything but hurt our brothers and sisters, and that's not what it's about. And then, so I'm not going to pick up the stick he's going to give me. I'm not going to pick up the knife he's going to give me. I'm not going to pick up the weapon he's going to give me. Yes, do I have some very strong beliefs? Have I had some experiences that have taught me powerful things that I have a strong testimony of? Absolutely. Will I tell you? Absolutely. Will I tell you with love? Absolutely. Will I tell you that you're going to hell because you're not doing it? No, I never will. I will tell you that there is a bigger, brighter, more beautiful path that you can get on. There is always more opportunity. Doesn't matter who you are or what you have right now. There is more in store for you. But I'm not going to poke you with a stick and say, you're an idiot. You didn't do what you should have done, because that doesn't help anybody. That's who I am. I'm the guy who's going to love.
I love that. We're going to wrap up by asking you what your vision is for the church. What's your hope for the future?
Oh man, you got another hour? All right, here we go. No, here's what it boils down to. And I've heard you ladies talk about it, and I'm not in the UK, so I don't know the challenges you guys are facing, but it sounds like it's a hard time. I will tell you, Joseph Smith and the people that followed him went to Kirtland. And in Kirtland, Ohio, a lot of things happened, and the church split. There was a new church that formed, and there was a church over here, and this side excommunicated that side, and that side excommunicated this side, and they parted ways, never again to cross paths and meet. And then Joseph Smith and others went to Missouri, and it happened again. And Joseph Smith went to Nauvoo, and it happened again. And Brigham Young took the saints across the plains to Utah, and it happened again. It always happens because we are children. And the hope that I have and the message that I try to share is that if we will, with patience and with kindness and with love, try to learn the gospel more for ourselves, to understand what my path is with my Father in heaven. If I can work on me, I'm not going to try and tell how the church needs to change. I'm not going to tell my bishop how our ward needs to change. I'm not going to tell the elders quorum president how they're failing. It's not my business. What I know is God has taught me a lot of things. God had to work a miracle in my life to get me to a point that I could be that man, that I could be the man that he could call into a bishopric or call into a stake high council. And I'm more concerned about what's next on my path. And I find that when I work hard on my path and I work on me, I get to meet wonderful ladies like you or wonderful people like you. And I get to share that experience. And hopefully that helps you guys and gives you some hope and gives you some purpose and gives you some direction. When I was in a bishopric, I got to do that in temple recommend interviews and worthiness interviews and youth programs and all these things I got to do. In stake high council, I got to do that working with the ward that I was assigned to and working with, I was in charge of facilities. You look at that and go, that's not a very church spiritual job. It was awesome to get to talk to members about the importance of keeping these facilities sacred and clean, nice. And as long as I'm working on me, and I'm asking my Father in heaven, I'm facing a challenge. I'm facing a wall before me that I need to overcome. And I'm fairly certain, because I've learned from experience, that if I can get up and over this wall, there's something better on the other side. There's something new and exciting on the other side. So help me get there. And then whomever you've got in my path who needs that, I will happily and with charity and kindness share that message. And my hope is that if I can be that guy as much as possible, and I don't know how much Jane has watched my actions on Twitter. That's who I try to be. I joke that I'm this with my wife, that I'm good old father reaching out and giving fatherly advice to my children. And I do. I try to be that guy and just with patience and love share wisdom with those people that I meet there and in my personal life. And my hope is that if I can impact those people's lives that way and they can hear the experience.
Oh, I think we've just lost Jared. Hopefully he will jump back on. One moment. I think we've got you right here, Jared. Okay, hopefully he's going to be able to join us again. We are just wrapping up. So in the event, oh, here we go.
Oh, okay.
Hey!
So to kind of conclude, because I'm dragging this on, but my hope is that as I do that, as I teach my children that, as I share that with people I meet on Twitter, as I share that with people in my workplace, as I share that with people in my ward, and I share that with people that I'm just passing on the street, and I just love them. And I show them that I love them and I care about them. It doesn't matter what their religion is. It doesn't matter what their, their background is, what their experiences are. I love them. And it's cool. And if you want to talk to me about it, we can talk about it. If you want some ideas, I got some cool ideas. If you don't want ideas, you don't need ideas, that's fine. But if I do that, and my children do that, and you guys learn and grow from that, and you do that, and the people listening do that, and we just keep passing that on, then it's going to help a lot more people. Do I think there's still going to be those who push against it and push away? There are going to be those who become more angry and more entrenched in their beliefs? Yes. And I hope that God, working on them, will find a way that they can find that peace and that joy in that direction as well. I'm not going to condemn them for it. I'm not going to argue with them for it. I'm just going to trust that God knows them better than I do. And if he needs me to step in, he's going to put me in their path. That's my hope.
Jared, you are wonderful and we love you. Alana, coolest member of the church. Really
no, stop saying no. There's way cooler than me.
I don't want to give him a big head.
No, yeah, trust me, don't do that. My wife will be so mad at you guys if you do that. Oh my gosh, she is never gonna let me talk to you again. She's gonna say those women are terrible for you. They made your ego too big, and now you're a jerk. And
I mean, I hear that. Yeah, can you imagine if this is the episode that that turned Jared into a jerk? Yeah.
No, trust me, I've been down that road. I'm not going down that road again. No way, no how. That was terrible. So.
But honestly, I think if we can be that person, we need more guys with green mohawks and
I'm a fan, yeah.
Bring on the mohawks.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate your words. And as we let you go, we just want to thank you for the great work that you do on Twitter. If anyone, are you okay? Like, do you want to shout out for followers if anyone wants to come and see what you're up to on Twitter?
Sure. So I'm not one of these people who has a bunch of anonymous accounts. I just make myself transparent. I'm at Jared Parmenter. I think that's what I am on Twitter. I think that's what I am on Instagram. With TikTok, I got a little spicy, and I think I'm like at Utah Yeti. So
you have TikTok.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok.
I need to find you. I need to find you.
Just bear in mind, I don't post anything yet. Like, I've done a couple little goofy videos here and there, but yeah, at Utah Yeti there. I'm mostly just there making comments. I'm toying with some ideas of maybe doing some silly stuff there. I think it's a fun place. But no, on Instagram, on Twitter, all the friends in the world are welcome. At Jared Parmenter is my handle, and yeah, I'm just the kooky old guy. I sometimes quote movies or quote rock and roll music or talk about the gospel or post funny memes. I'm just there to have a good time and make friends and just love everybody. You guys are awesome.
The person to lift you up on Twitter, and it's needed. So thank you for doing that. And, you know, not just on Twitter, but in life, we want to bless your journey and just thank you so much for being that light and in the lives of the people that you've met. And now you're at the UK. We want to thank you. So hopefully
I'm excited.
We'll get to catch up soon. Yeah.
I hope I get to come there and harass you guys in person at some point in the future. That would be fantastic.
Awesome.
I for those who are listening, I told them that I had kind of a selfish motivation for doing this. I was trying to make myself popular with the people in the UK, so I have lots of friends to hang out with when I go. So I went there when I was 17, and I've been meaning to get back ever since. And I want to drag my kids and show them that their dad, the crazy old guy with the mohawk, is super popular. People in the UK think he's amazing.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, absolutely. We will keep you. We will absolutely keep you. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you to all of our viewers. If you do want to get in touch with the show, you can just message us. Don't forget to like and follow, and we will see you for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Bye.